Buon pomeriggio a tutti. Abbiamo una forte concorrenza dalle sale formazione, lo sapevo, oggi pomeriggio. Partiamo con questa intervista, sarà completamente in inglese, quindi se qualcuno di voi vuol prendere le cuffiette le prenda adesso. E chiamo sul palco Arnie Weissmann, editor in chief di Travel Weekly. So, Arnie, let's have a seat. It's a very strange position for me. It's too often. I have planned this interview with you because every time, we shouldn't say that, but every time we have invited Google on BTO, he has come for many years, but the feedback that we have got from the public, they haven't said much. So I think to have a free and great vision about what Google is doing in travel, my idea was to have an interview with you. We have a little film, I think, to start. Okay. No, I don't think this is the right spot. Here we are.
short, we think the travel ecosystem is a very big...
So, what we learned from this video, this video was shown during the last Focusrite conference in Scottsdale, Arizona, and you see here Jeremy Wertmeier, which is on top of the Google Travel. So he was before ITA software,
right.
And now it's looking after all the project in travel for Google. Google has shown in this video that it is the center of any decision taken in travel. I think the purpose was to show that he is there and is doing a lot for his own websites, but also for the third-party website. The general impression that we have during the Focusrite conference was that the Google Travel products, which were proudly announced 1 year before after the acquisition of ITA software, were going a little slower, right? Google Hotel Finder, Google Flight Search. What do you think about that?
Yes, I think that in fact Google has gotten off to a slow start in what they had hoped to do. I'm going to read a quick quote. On the day that Google acquired Jeremy's company, ITA Software, which has all sorts of the airline scheduling, Jeff Huber, who is the Senior Vice President for Commerce at Google, said this on the day they acquired it. How cool would it be if you could type flights to somewhere sunny for under $500 in May into Google and get not just a set of links, but also flight times, fares, and a link to sites where you can actually buy tickets quickly and easily. So he was stating really what he thought Google's vision for where search could go. That was said in July 2010, and in September 2011, they launched Google Flight Search. And this is what, if you were to type in this particular case, flights New York to Rome, you can see below the obvious ads with the yellow shading, it brings up a box. And this is on top of organic search. So before organic search, you get a pretty good representation of flights New York to Rome. But then things begin to maybe not work so well. If we could see the next slide. This is what you get if you type in New York to Rome, December 3rd. So you're just adding one additional search filter into it, but they can't handle that. You know, in their original speech, they're talking about taking many things together and giving you a rich experience, but you add just one element, a date, and it can handle it in the flight search component, but not at the top line search, which is what he was talking about. And if you go even one more slide, you saw it was fairly good if you type New York to Rome, but then you type Rome to New York, you get only one result, Alitalia. And if you click through to the site, it doesn't even take you to a page where it has the scheduled flights. You just go to the Alitalia homepage. So they have a long way to go.
Right,
They're more than a year, 2 years after the acquisition. The search itself is actually quite fast, but when it comes to using Google as a search line, maybe not so much. So if you go to hotels, however, they've gotten a little further. If you type Rome hotels, so Rome hotels, it gives you some of their partner hotels and the prices, but probably more importantly, on the right side of the screen, it shows a map. And they've integrated Google Hotels very well with Google Maps. And if you click on that, you'll get a listing of all the hotels that have paid to be promoted. So they're a little further along in hotels in some respects than they are in the flight department.
Right. No, I was very impressed that the questions that were posed to Jeremy at the Focusrite conference were, let's say, difficult question to answer for him because all the project had been running very, very slowly. I don't know if it is something. I remember that when Google acquired ITA software, they have this battle against Google by firstsearch.org, which was Expedia and
Yeah,
other
there
companies.
were a number of companies which banded together to try to stop the acquisition.
Right.
They appealed to the U.S. Justice Department and said, don't allow this purchase, this acquisition to go through. And they were partially successful. When the Justice Department made its ruling, it said, yes, you can buy it, but you have to continue ITA's license to competitors, including Kayak, including Bing, for at least 5 years. You have to make sure that any information you gather from ITA cannot be shared with any other part of Google. So they were able to wall off their worries, at least for 5 years, until 2016. Then things, it'll be looked at again.
It seems every time that Google does something, there's a lot of expectation, of course. So I remember when we had the news, even here in Italy, everyone was thinking that for some reason the whole distribution was going to change and that Google's will have killed the OTAs in some ways. But then, I mean, I don't think Google have any reason to kill the OTA market.
No, there's, the question of whether or not Google goes into transactions comes up a lot. People are very concerned that if they go directly into transactions, but there's 3 very good reasons why it's unlikely in the foreseeable future that they would get into transactions. First of all, it's a low margin business. Google likes high margin businesses.
Right.
So, and 2, if all of you who sell travel know, it's a high customer service expectation. Google is not set up for that. And third, their customers who are paying them lots and lots and lots of money would become their competitors. So they would be fighting against all the people who today are making them one of the most successful travel search sites.
Right.
So it's very unlikely. I can imagine a couple of scenarios where it could happen. We'll get to that a little later, I think, in the discussion. Yeah.
My real second question was that Google is keeping in acquiring content, because recently he took the acquisition of Frommer's and Zagat, which Zagat is not too known in Europe. It's mainly an American thing, but I mean, we know this, but it's not well known. What do you think will Mountain View do with those content that he gets from there?
Well, it's interesting. When the timing of the acquisitions was interesting. For a long time, Google Places scraped a lot of review sites. So they scraped TripAdvisor.
Right.
And they were taking TripAdvisor information, and they were populating a lot of the Google Places with information that they just took from other people. Now, the other companies didn't like that so much. But really, when you think about it, TripAdvisor was in a lose-lose situation. They have to protect the traffic to their site, so they protest what Google is doing. But then what Google did was they said, okay, we'll only use our own Google Plus and Google Places. When someone signs into that, those will be the reviews we see. So TripAdvisor now loses all that prominence that it had when it was with Google. But they had to also replace that content. So they made 2 acquisitions in this area, which I think actually were quite smart. One is Zagat, and if you don't know Zagat, they aggregate lots of comments to create one review. It's sort of the wisdom of the crowd. So they'll review thousands of what surveys people fill out, and they'll reduce it down to 2 sentences. So, and Frommer's is a guidebook which is very famous. The person who started Arthur Frommer is like a guru, a travel guru. So you have on one side the wisdom of the crowd, on the other side the guru. And one time I actually invited Tim Zagat, who started Zagat, and Arthur Frommer, who started Frommer's, as well as Tony Wheeler of Lonely Planet and Steve Kaufer of TripAdvisor, to sit at one table and to discuss the future of where things were going for guidebooks and things like that. And Tim Zagat got into a big argument with Arthur Fromer. And Fromer said that he likes, instead of the wisdom of the crowd, he likes to read a restaurant review by the critic of the New York Times, Frank Bruni. And so Tim Zagat says, no. He says, what the hell does he have, a PhD in taste buds? You know, so it was a lively argument. So you have two very different approaches, and Google buys both. So they're really covering their bases. They're really making sure they have everything. And if you go to the next slide, they've begun the integration already of Zagat. Before, and if you see this is from their hotel search page, and you look in the middle there, it's the hotel...
San Carlos Hotel
San Carlos Hotel.
Zagat.
A little Zagat. If you click on that, then you'll go to the Zagat review of that. But I think they're new to publishing in some ways, and they're creating a little brand confusion. The color red that is on this is Zagat's color. But they are also using it for the other reviews that are just with what other people will be filling in. And with Fromer, if you go to the next slide, so this is the Fromer website. We just captured this about an hour ago. There's no clue about that that Google owns them. If you go to the next slide, at the very bottom, I don't know if you can see it, it says copyright John Wiley Company. That's the company that sold it 4 months ago. So they're not really yet on top of the Fromer acquisition, but they will. They'll start integrating these reviews.
I think I want to pass to a question which I was thinking to do after, but buying content seems a strategic thing in the US at the moment. Everyone I was before in a panel where we talk about the experience of room key, so having a lot of different hotel company put together in order to have a battle against OTA at a different commission. And the fact that Priceline has taken kayak, so that it will mean by some of us that Priceline and Booking are entering the flight battle.
Yes, they're entering. It's interesting. The question really is Priceline going to move kayak closer to Priceline, or is kayak going to pull Priceline closer to it? And I think that the answer is that kayak is going to become more like Priceline. They used to be a pure search, meta search, where if you got a result, you clicked through, you were taken to the website of an OTA, to an airline directly. But with about a year ago, they began to actually do the transactions for hotels. And the CEO of Priceline has already said that they're going to do with kayak more and more transactions with kayak. So I think it will be not so much a concern to Google. Google is about search, right? So they want to own search. They want everybody to do all searching on Google. So the only thing that will concern them is if people choose some other website to do their search. And to be honest, right now, it is easier, you'll get a better result if you search on an OTA for most things than you will get with Google. But that may change over time. And one of the things, an advantage that Google has, perhaps, is that it can look out for the consumer and try to give the consumer a pleasing experience, whereas an OTA is always going to be looking at driving the consumer to the highest margin. They need to please the consumer, but they also need to really make as much money as they can. So that may be, in the end, what really is the advantage for Google. But on the topic of transactions, yesterday Fabio Lazzarini
Lazzarini, yeah.
from Amadeus told a very interesting stories about intermediaries. And he said that Barilla Pasta, which is very popular in the US as well as here, decided to create cookies and said to a grocery store, if you want my pasta, you have to take my cookies also. And then a very large supermarket said, no, we can do without both of you. And Barilla backed off and they said, okay, just take the pasta. Something very surprising happened last year. When flight search came out from Google, all of the links went directly to the airlines. They did not have any links to OTAs. And they gave all sorts of reasons why, but none of them really made a lot of sense until Jeremy, who was in the slide there, went to Focusrite and he confessed that the airline said, we will not participate if you allow OTA bookings on your site. Now, I think that Google was probably more in the position of the grocery store. I think they could have said, well, then, you don't want to do it. I'm sure some other airlines will. But Google blinked. So Google seems very powerful, and it seems like they should have had the upper hand. And frankly, it's astounding to me that they went to this pressure. But it shows that Google actually may do some things that are not purely for the consumer interest. And the second, the real competitor for Google is not the OTAs. It's not Kayak, it's not Priceline, it's not Expedia, it's Apple. So when you look at what might drive Google into transactions, especially as mobile rises and it's the Android versus the iPhone, that could drive Google to do that.
Which was my next question about, about Fromers and Zagat. Do you think they will have an usage on mobile device since Google has invested so much on Android?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is part of the mobile strategy, that they want to give a very rich experience. And Zagat has been in mobile for 5-6 years. I mean, they were very early. And so they have a complete site already there. Fromers is very progressive on mobile. So there's no question that they will be integrating these products in as quickly as they can. It's just a little slower than they would like.
My impression is that the steps that Google has done into travel were not all really technically correct. And most of the people, they do think that the main step that Google has really changed travel is Google Maps. I was to add one thing, I was very impressed during the Focusrite conference seeing ITA software, part of Google Travel, showing that they're going to maps building in the US.
Yeah.
Where is our privacy anymore?
Well, yeah. There's a couple of interesting things going on there. So, generally speaking, Apple is very good about product. They will test a product and make sure a product is perfect before they bring it to the market. Google has a different approach. When Flight Search was first released, everybody was shocked at how bad it was, all the things that were missing. They only had economy class. You couldn't book business class or first class. They could only book US flights. You couldn't book international flights. So they're slowly adding in international flights. And that's the way Google moves, is they add things a little bit. But there was a great shock, I think, to everybody when the new iPhone came out. Because of the intense rivalry between Apple and Google, they stopped using Google Maps, right?
Right.
And they put out an inferior map. And this is, I think, this incredible competition between Google and Apple is forcing both of them to release products before they're really ready for market. Right. And I think the consumer loses, perhaps, but Google did get the jump on maps. And there's some interesting things we'll get to a little bit later about what Google is doing with maps and with the filming the interior of buildings. They filmed the Louvre. They filmed the interiors of museums, and they're starting with public places first. And this could
public places, I may understand, even if for security reason, even public places could be dangerous.
I'm surprised too. And I think there are some commercial applications, which I think we'll get to in a moment. Yeah.
That's good. Another thing that we discuss a lot. I mean, I remember also it's a few years that in BTO even we are discussing that is that the travel search for some reason seems not to be all Google based. As we were saying before, there's a lot of people who go directly to the OTAs or go directly to TripAdvisor to check a destination or a flight or an hotel before passing through Google. So it's my idea. So I want you to confirm or not my idea that Google also sees that travel, which is the most important thing that you have to buy on the web, is not anymore passing all through the search site, but it goes direct to some other sources.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's two things going on at once. Right now, I would say the OTA experience is better than Google, but so much of the OTA traffic is driven by Google. So
Right.
it's kind of a strange paradox. People start their travel on search on Google, and they find the OTAs, and then they'll go there and have a richer experience yet. Google's just the kind of the gatekeeper at first, but they're not yet providing the level of depth that the OTAs can provide.
That's something.
But it bothers them. They hate it when anyone can do search better than they can.
I know. I mean, another impression that we have is that Google is not arriving anymore first on some of the things. It's like the social media. I mean, how many in this room they are using Google Plus? Let's see. How many are using Facebook?
Yeah, many more.
Many more. And Google Plus is not really starting. I know that in some places like South America also is working better, but
I think they take a long view, and they have so many ways to touch consumers with, there's Google Plus, there's the Gmail, and there's increasingly these sorts of things. If they can gather lots of information from many of the ways that they touch consumers, they can present consumers with a more refined search if the consumer allows them to do it. And there's some people who think that they're going to ask consumers permission to scan their email, not read their email if they have a Gmail account, to help them be sure that the search, when they go on and search, that they're getting the right things. They're going to pick up clues from what you say.
It's really Big Brother in some ways.
It's very much
I
Big Brother.
mean, it's Big
Yeah,
Brother
with
in
permission.
all senses. They know where I live. They know even the interior of my house somehow. Looking far into the future, where could Google take travel? And will it change how people shop to travel?
Okay, so this is looking very far into the future.
Very far.
Not next year, probably not even 5 years, but soon. So Google, as you mentioned, is now beginning to map not just our streets, but our public buildings. And they're going to continue to do it. And there is a really interesting commercial application that can really affect and impact travel. So there is something that is called, it doesn't exist yet, but they're talking about it, the paraverse. Paraverse, parallel universe. And some of you may have seen Second Life,
Right.
or have experienced through games different worlds that seem to be complete worlds. So this is a marriage between Google Maps, street views, the interiors of buildings. So let's say, and I'm going to step back one more step. I went to a breakfast of the World Economic Forum recently, and they got together all of the CEOs of airlines, and they say, what is the future of aviation? And so they talk about it in terms of aviation. They get the car people together, and they say, what is the future of cars? And they go, oh, cars will fly, cars will do this. But they have these discussions with every form of transportation, and then they bring in the IT guys, the technical people. And the first thing they say is, well, people won't need to travel. People will be able to do so much from their homes. And what I think people will, of course, continue to travel, but they're right in other regards. So if you look at the paraverse, and you start out where you are and you want to find out about a hotel in Greece. So you use Google Maps and you zoom in on Athens, then you zoom in on a street, and then you're going up to the hotel. And now, if you have given permission to map that hotel, you go through the door, perhaps an avatar is there who can respond to you, and you say, I want to see what your standard room looks like. And you walk through the hotel and you look at the standard room. And there's technology now that allows you to really get a 360-degree view of what the room will look like. Then you say, well, let me see what the spa looks like. And you walk down and look at the spa. Now, this is really...
So it's a sort of virtual real world.
It is. It's a virtual real world, exactly. Right. And it's a marriage of all these things that Google is doing. So it's much more than just, I have $500, tell me where's a sunny place to go in May. They can show it to you, and they can show it to you in ways that you can compare five different ways.
I'm saying that to all the hoteliers in the room. It means that Google is going to ask us advertising on this sort of real world soon as we open one door of the room.
Right, that's right. And so it's an opportunity for a hotel, certainly. It's a big opportunity for Google. And if the OTAs can't keep up with this technology, if they can't figure out a way to stay in that intermediary position, they're going to be out. Almost everybody will be out because Google doesn't, at the end of the day, they don't really, if they get up into, they'll be getting money from the property, right, who will want to be in, and then the property will say, I've made this investment to advertise with you. I don't need an intermediary. Just do the transaction directly with me. So if there's going to be a book it button, maybe at the front desk, then it's going to be a direct booking, and the intermediaries may be out. That's the...
So it comes in mind a last question. Since you said that the real competitor of Google is Apple, and I think everybody agrees in this room that it's like that. They compete on mobile, they compete on everything. There were also a lot of talks about this application that should have come out called iTravel. That seems to come exactly out of the head of Steve Jobs before he died, which will be a kind of killer application because I remember the idea, the things that I've seen on the web, it was something like the iTunes for travel, right? So Apple was trying to close deals with all the major players in order to present that. You think it will come out, something like that? Or?
It could. Since Steve Jobs died, there's been a lot written about the changes in the culture at Apple. Just the fact that they would release these maps that were not really competitive. My guess is that travel is such an information-rich area where search is so important to it that everybody who is going to be in the space is going to really be in it in a big way. So I would be surprised if you look at, travel's ranking among the different types of commerce, it's very high and just below pornography, right? Mm-hmm. So it's got a lot of interest from everybody, and I can't imagine Apple is just going to say, oh, Google, you can have it. They're not going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Arnie Weissmann. Thank you.
Okay.
For the first time, we have had a real Google interviews, and we have talked about, without Google, we have talked about everything about him. Thank you, Arnie.
Thank you.
Ci vediamo più tardi per il panel del mobile. Main Hall fa un po' di stop, ci vediamo più tardi per il mobile, che è l'ultimo panel di BTO 2012 in Main Hall. Grazie.